When it comes to Trenbolone, I think we have a firm grasp on how to minimize the adverse effects, whether that's short duration, low dose Trenbolone usage, or using prophylactic ancillaries regarding harm reduction and risk mitigation. And again, the rest of the case reports are individual cases of adverse effects that aren't solely related to the usage of Trenbolone. Could be caused by a multitude of different factors, whether that's Trenbolone in combination with a multitude of different factors or a multitude of different factors not related to Trenbolone, but unfortunately Trenbolone was used at that time. Many of these adverse effects can be caused by other performance-enhancing drugs, not just steroids, or, well, general lifestyle choices. In the discussion, the researchers mentioned that Trenbolone abuse was associated with a wide range of adverse health effects, albeit that it's very hard to determine that these adverse effects were solely caused by Trenbolone and not an unfortunate result of several circumstances, polypharmacy, lifestyle choices, or other factors, all while using Trenbolone at that point in time. Here, the researchers also reference to the best anecdotal Trenbolone study we have at this point in time, Timothy Pietkowski's My Mind Pretty Much Went to Mush study, which, like this index of case reports, highlights the correlation between Trenbolone and psychological distress and verbal aggression, etc. And I already went through that study extensively here on this YouTube channel, so don't forget to give that video a watch and a like and a comment and a subscribe and share it with all of your friends and follow the citations so you can read that study for yourself and laugh hysterically at the Trenbolone quotes that the researchers highlight. And this is pretty funny. I found this in the discussion, which either confirms that the researchers were part of the GH15 boardings back in the day before it got wiped off the internet, or they simply forgot to translate Trenbolone in Portuguese to Trenbolone in English. I think that they visited the GH15 boarding. That's a more likely and more plausible and more interesting explanation. In the conclusion, the researchers mentioned that Trenbolone, like other anabolic androgenic steroids, are associated with heart failure, myocardial infarction, cholestatic liver injury, nephropathy, and psychiatric disorders. But they failed to mention that many of these adverse effects can be avoided, can be mitigated, and be resolved with intelligent use, low dose, short duration Trenbolone usage, and using prophylactic ancillaries to control your blood pressure, which already prevent left ventricular hypertrophy and damage to the kidneys, or ancillaries like cholesterol medications that prevent plaque buildup, further preventing cardiovascular disease down the road, and using TUDCA to prevent liver injury or liver damage or other issues with your digestive tract. And God forbid you use something like a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, like fluvoxamine or vortioxetine, which are very potent regarding neurogenesis and might be able to offset some of the neurotoxic effect that Trenbolone potentiates, or using a MAOA inhibitor, like methylene blue, for example, which might be able to prevent this bronchoconstriction or the lack of oxygenation that you get on Trenbolone, hindering your endurance and stamina. And of course, the MAOA inhibiting effects of methylene blue increase your serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine levels, which can also help you modulate your mood while using Trenbolone and offset and mitigate tren rage altogether. The researchers also mentioned that Trenbolone's toxicity is poorly understood due to the lack of clinical evidence performed in humans, which is very, very true. I mean, besides this study and the Timothy Pietkowski study and a couple studies locked in the Merck Animal Health USA vault, potentially, that's all we basically have to work with. And then there's 900 animal models and in vitro studies that we can learn something from. But I think the bodybuilding community, the fitness community, has done an excellent job on educating everybody that wants to use Trenbolone regarding its potential side effects. I mean, the documented cases anecdotally on Trenbolone usage and how to mitigate side effects are plenty, not only on this YouTube channel in the form of the Trenbolone deep dive or other Trenbolone videos that I made in the past. You can find videos about Trenbolone or Reddit reports on Trenbolone or pages upon pages on pages on the steroid forums about Trenbolone and how to mitigate the side effects. So even though there's no human clinical data, I think the community has done an excellent job on how to educate everybody else in the community on how to minimize and mitigate side effects regarding Trenbolone use, and whether that's short duration, low dose Trenbolone usage, or using prophylactic ancillaries regarding harm reduction and risk mitigation. When it comes to Trenbolone, I think we have a firm grasp on how to minimize the adverse effects. I agree with the researchers where they mentioned that among most case reports, toxicology screening was not performed, meaning that we can't be 100% sure that Trenbolone was even present in their system when all of these adverse effects started to manifest. And they also not reported what the exact Trenbolone dosages were or for how long they were taking Trenbolone until these adverse effects started to manifest. So a lot of conjecture and incomplete information in these case reports, I would say. In only 5 out of the 23 case reports, toxicology screening was performed, but it was mostly during the autopsy after the patient had passed away. And the rest of the case reports included self-reported Trenbolone usage, but we still don't know exactly sure how much of a contributing factor Trenbolone played into the observed adverse effects. Was it Trenbolone 100% the root cause of these observed effects, or maybe 1%, 5%, 10%? I guess we'll never know. The researchers mentioned that there should be more Trenbolone education for the Trenbolone users as well as the healthcare providers to minimize risk and reduce harm. But to be fair, the education is already out there, whether that's here on this YouTube channel or on the steroid forums, on Reddit, behind a paywall on the membership sites, various anabolics books. There's plenty of steroid education and Trenbolone education out there. All you have to do is go out and look and educate yourself. And that being said, the large majority of the Trenbolone users, especially the abusers out there, they choose not to educate themselves. They don't do their blood work. They don't manage their blood pressure. They don't live a healthy lifestyle, cooking all of their own meals. And they actually take way too much Tren to compensate for the lack of effort that they put into the kitchen as well as into the gym. That's the problem here. And that's where most of these case reports are stemming from. If you go through all of the case reports, you see that there's maybe 1 or 2 bodybuilders at most. And that brings me to the next fact. The large majority of the Trenbolone users out there are basically borderline retarded. Just go to TikTok where you can see the Trenbolone challenge, the 30-day Trenbolone challenge. None of those guys are bodybuilders. They take Tren for the sake of it. They want to experiment with it. They haven't put in the foundation to become a bodybuilder. I mean, Trenbolone is meant for bodybuilders, strongmen, or powerlifters at the highest level, especially for competitive athletes. But Trenbolone is now being used, being popped as Tic Tacs. And this is where most of these case reports and most of the adverse effects are actually stemming from. Again, most people who take Trenbolone are actual gym rats and have no business taking Tren in the first place. And I really don't think that healthcare professionals have any responsibility educating Trenbolone abusers at all. I mean, why would you risk losing your medical license over people who choose to take veterinary drugs themselves? I mean, we decide to take these drugs. We decide to take Trenbolone. So it's our responsibility to educate ourselves about harm reduction and risk mitigation with the information which is provided aplenty all over the internet. Putting the responsibility of education in the hands of a doctor is the easy and the pussy way out. And if you really don't want to educate yourself, do the research and sift through hours and hours and hours of high quality content, including the Trenbolone deep dive, which is linked down below. If you don't want to do that, if you want to know what Trenbolone actually does, go to a bodybuilding gym or a cattle ranch and ask around there, dude. And again, further human studies will never be performed on Trenbolone since it's not an FDA-approved medication in humans, at least not after 1997. That is, and I'm sure those human studies will stay locked in the Merck Animal Health USA vault indefinitely, because from what I've heard, those human studies are kind of immoral and inhumane, like how parabolin treatment affected the fetus during the pregnancy of women who were treated with parabolin for various medical reasons. So long story short, too long didn't read. Trenbolone poses significant risk, especially when you take it at higher dosages for longer periods of time. I mean, just look at the case reports and the reports anecdotally of high-dose long-term Trenbolone sandwich usage. That's why the exposure duration should be reasonably short at lower dosages, which are still effective if you combine it with other anabolic androgenic steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, which are reasonably anabolic. So maybe 6 to 8 weeks at moderate triple-digit dosages at the end of a contest prep, let's say 150 milligrams, 225 milligrams, maybe 350 milligrams, Trenbolone acetate or annotate or hexahydrobenzocarbonate, again, the last couple of weeks of a contest prep, depending on your level of experience and your overall muscularity and what level of competition you're going to compete in, and maybe lower double-digit dosages for, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks, sometime during an off-season phase, at most 12 weeks, assuming that the dose is very close to the medical dosages used in the 1980s up until 1997. So we're talking about 50 milligrams to 25 milligrams Trenbolone acetate per week. Yes, I've done this and it worked great. Still, right, and watch the Trenbolone deep dive if you're not entirely sure on why these low and effective dosages actually work. And this is only if you have your shit together, you follow a healthy lifestyle, you got all of the prophylactic ancillaries in place to make sure that all of the side effects which are commonly associated with Trenbolone, even at lower dosages, are completely mitigated.